What's up? My name is Jordan Mitchell, and welcome to the third ever episode of the Finding Fugami Podcast. On this episode, I'm talking to James Okina, who's one of my friends from university and is one of the most pure, well-intentioned individuals that I know. About 6 years ago, he founded an organization called Street Priests, which helps street children in Nigeria kind of transform their life and reach their full potential. And he does a lot of amazing work with that. He was the founder, now he's a board member. Now he's the CEO of Erupt Art, which is an organization here in America that it's an organization that engages artists to try to create for change. And he's also a strategic advisor for SAP. He just graduated and was an RA while juggling all of this. But yeah, super interesting. I'm gonna stop talking now and get into it.
Well, thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you for that humbling introduction. I am really honored to be here, and really in the middle of all of this. And we can talk about all the things that I'm doing, but in fact, I'm just a young man trying to navigate my way through the world. So with conversations like this, I think it's brilliant. So thank you for this platform.
Thank you. No worries. So I guess if you just want to get right into it, your story is a very interesting one that I think a lot of people would like to hear. So I guess how did you end up here in university in America, and what was that journey from Nigeria to here?
Well, it's a long one. It's a very long road, but I think, where do I even start from? So you talked about my organization in Nigeria, and that's really where it starts from. But I'm going to tell the story from a slightly different path, right? I founded my organization about 1 year just before I got into university. I graduated high school when I was 14 years old. I took one gap year. So when I was 15, I started working. It was during the time I was working, and I had different ambitions at the time. At the time, I wanted to start my own business. So I was working as a marketer for a company. And then I became the marketing director at 15, which was really cool because I had exposure into all of these things. Where I was just, trying to market the product. It was like a local fashion company. Where I was just trying to market the product before. Now I was into negotiations, creating proposals, talking about like a lot of money and all of this stuff. So it really exposed me to leadership, negotiation, like making deals and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know this would become very crucial in my work later at the time. But when I got involved with my work 1 year after I started working, which coincided just before I got into university at 16.
And this is university in Nigeria?
This is university in Nigeria, the University of Calabar. I was studying business management. And so I was really curious. Mind you, my choice of business management was informed by the fact that I wanted to become an entrepreneur. I wanted to build businesses. That was my passion, which led me to to the work I was doing at the time. But when I got involved with this, at first I told myself, you know what, I'm going to work on this for 5 years. That's literally what I told myself. I'm going to work on this for 5 years, and then I'm going to leave, and then I'm going to go back to businesses, to founding business and doing my thing.
You're talking about Street Priests?
Yes.
You're going to work on that for 5 years.
So I said I was going to work on Street Priests for 5 years. At the time, it wasn't even Street Priests. I had no name. I just knew I really cared about this children and teenagers. And I feel weird saying children because at the time I was 15, some of them were 14, 13. And so I was a child as well, and we're about the same age, mate. So, but I just couldn't turn an eye. And I think as we talk about purpose, I think this is one of the things that comes to the fore for me the most. I think many times our perception of what purpose is what the problem might be, and where the challenge we find ourselves lies the most. As long as I was concerned, even though my heart was with the kids,
Yeah.
it didn't look like what I imagined my purpose would be.
Like, it didn't look like when you imagined it before you went into it?
Yeah, not before I went into it. No, but when I thought about my life and my purpose, or what I want to be known for, or what legacy I want to leave behind, I wasn't thinking street children. So that was the discrepancy, you know. So I had that dissonance for a very long time, because even when people started knowing me for that, I didn't feel comfortable with it, you know, because I wanted to do other stuff. I wanted to build businesses, you know. And at the time, I was also, you know, very passionate about, and I'm still very passionate about young people, even though I'm still a young person and I was a young person. I'll go into high schools, organize seminars, I'll bring in speakers. I will, I did a lot, I think between 2014 and 2015, the conferences and seminars I organized in high schools had over 20,000 students.
Really?
Yes.
And you're like 17 at the time?
No, I was 16.
Really?
I was 15, 16, thereabout, something like that.
Yeah.
So I would literally use my money, maybe talk to a few people, talk to a few friends, organize resources, and go into these high schools.
Is this the money that you were making from
my business? Yes. So I'll do all of these things, and I was just extremely passionate. I'm still very passionate to see my country develop. I'm still very passionate to see young people do well. Like, it's one of the things that I've always known, right? I'm also very passionate about seeing the continent develop. So I wanted to do everything I could to help out. If I watched a video, a TED Talk that I felt really impacted me, I wanted to share it. So I don't even wait to have a conference. I'll share it with close friends. When I'm having a seminar, I want them to watch it, you know. And I can still remember so many videos that were really inspiring to me at the time. And for me, it was about the most simple things. Like, there was this kid in Kenya whose grandmom had an issue where her cattle, because she lived on the edge of the national park, her cattle was always being killed by lions and hyenas and all that stuff. And this kid was trying to think, he was about maybe 9 years old, was trying to think about ways to help his grandmother. And he had an idea. Usually, lions won't come near if they perceive that someone is there.
Like with a flashlight?
With a flashlight. So what he did was he basically put lights in different strategic, areas and had them blink. Like someone was turning off and on.
Night?
Yeah, throughout the night. Basically, that was what he did. And it saved his grandmom, cattle, other grandmothers around the area who kept cattle as well, asked him to come and install the same thing for them. And he gave a TED Talk about it. And I found it very inspiring, because that was just a simple idea. And young people always feel like they're not active agents in their own lives. I mean, not you, of course. And I hope you realize how much of an outlier you are. But most young people don't feel like they're active agents in their life. They feel like most things are happening to them. And that was something I wanted to change.
Interesting. And I think even I go through that as well. And was there a specific turning point where you were like, okay, I have to make this change, or was it gradual over time?
The turning point in my own personal life first was, so for background, I come from a very religious home, but I never had a connection to spirituality. I had never had a connection to God, even though we went to church on Sundays. We had morning devotions. For me, it was just the only thing that fascinated me by that was stories. And that's one constant in my life. Stories have always fascinated me. So, it was a story. So when my dad begins to tell a story about maybe a character in the Bible or about an experience he had, because he also liked to tell stories, then my eyes would lit up. Like, that's what I'm paying attention to. But every other thing wasn't real to me, right? When my parents separated in 2008, it was such a drastic change in my life. I can't even begin to tell you. I think the best way to explain it was that one day, all I was concerned with was go to school, come back home, eat, be a good kid. I literally didn't do anything. I and my brothers, we didn't even know how to tie our shoelaces.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, you can say we were spoiled, you know, but we came from a home that was very disciplined, but it was kind of, you just concentrate on being a good kid, doing well in school, eating. I never thought about what the next meal was going to be.
Yeah.
Because I just know that, okay, you show up at the dinner or lunch or breakfast table and food is ready and you eat and you go back to study or whatever it was. So it was very regimented. We didn't play with kids outside. When we were growing older and it was like, you know, we're 8, 7, 6, 5, that age where you really want to play with other kids and you really want to play soccer and stuff. The more we agitated for it, instead of letting us go play with other kids, the compromise was, here's your own soccer ball, here's your own ball, this is playtime. Basically, it was so regimented, just me and my brothers, so regimented. And as we're playing, my mom is watching.
Yeah.
If you fall the first time, she's counting 1. Fall the second time, 2. Fall the third time, you come inside. So it was that way. And then the very next day, it's like the whole world just turned upside down. We now have to wash our own clothes. We now have to think about what to eat. For the longest time in my life, the question, what would you like to eat, was very traumatic. Because it literally took me back to that time when it was so, I didn't know what to say. Because all of that was thought for me.
Everything just
happened so quickly. Now I am 8 years old, 9 years old. I'm an adolescent. I'm at the point in my life where I need parental guidance the most, but I don't have it. And freedom, which is one of the things that drew me the most to children on the streets. Freedom is dangerous, especially when you don't know how to use it.
And when you're young.
Exactly.
Especially.
And also as a child, you don't have a good concept of risks, you know. And then I'm going to school, there's that need to try to fit in.
Yeah.
And as kids, you do anything to fit in, to look cool.
Yeah.
You know, so I began to do a lot of like crazy stuff. I began to hang out with the wrong. And in retrospect, I understand that was just me seeking a sense of belonging, first and foremost.
That you weren't finding at home.
Yes, So I was trying to fill that gap. No discipline. I have one day. There's a time to go to bed. There's what to eat. There's all of that. The very next day, I have all this freedom and I don't know what to do with it. So I begin to shoplift. I begin to flunk school. I begin to do all kinds of things. And that was by far the darkest period of my life. And for me at the time, it was like, I knew I was made for something more. I knew that inside me. I didn't know how to
express
it, right? Many times I'm doing those things, I'm stealing, or I'm, we're just, causing trouble, up to no good. And it's like I'm beside myself looking at myself. That was literally, it was almost like an out of the body experience many times for me, because I can't believe I'm doing this, But at the same time, I'm doing it.
Yeah, and it feels like you want to change it.
But I can't. I
exactly.
don't have, I'm watching all of this happen. I'm literally tied to a chair and forced to watch this happen. And so for about 4 years, my life was off the rails. And
then until you're like 12 or 13?
Yes, until I was, that's very apt. 12, 13, thereabout. the first domino that begins to set off a course of events for me was, and of course there's a simplified version of the story, but just because we're going in depth, the first domino that set off the course of events was that we moved houses. And so I lost those friends that I had in the neighborhood that I was being truants with. I also changed schools, so I lost those friends as well.
Yeah. And was that just like your parents got a different job, or?
That was my dad. My dad just moved. Yeah, there wasn't no reason. I think we're moving to a bigger house, and he had been looking for that for a while. So that was just what happened. And so I was even more lost. But the only difference between when we moved and before, where I was before, was even though I was lost, I had some clarity and less pressure and less peer pressure to do those things. It coincided with when I had a cousin, I guess I can call him a cousin, and he moved in, and he just had a way about his life. He was a Christian as well, but it was not a Christian like me and my brothers were Christian. He really knew his stuff. Unlike us who just went to church, didn't know why, did stuff we didn't know why. He had a sense of meaning to why he did everything. So in that sense, we were religious, he wasn't, because he knew why he was doing what. We were just doing what we were told. Right? So we knew what, and then somehow he knew why.
That's interesting. There's a parable I was listening in a conference call the other day that someone was saying something similar. It was unrelated. It was talking about an organization, but where there's these three people working at a construction site, and this person asks, "What are you doing?" And the first person says, "I'm laying bricks." The second person says, "I'm building a wall." And then the third person looks up to the sky and is like, "I'm building a cathedral."
Wow.
So I guess in that sense,
that's exactly what it is, right?
Exactly.
And I think the same paradigm works for spirituality as it works for every area of life. And and because he knew exactly why he was doing what he was doing, he had more results. His life looked a lot more different. And for me, it was very inspiring. I never told him, but I really, really admired him. You know how you look at someone and they're everything that you want to be. They're everything that you're not. And that was what he was like to me. He was very giving, very generous, very, very wise.
And how old was he?
At the time he came, he was probably 18 or 19.
Okay.
Very wise, very disciplined. So many things that I wanted to covet. So I began to talk to him about I wanted to learn more. At the time, I'd never been anywhere, like lived anywhere outside of Calabar. And Lagos is the largest city in Nigeria and the most popular city in Africa as well. And he lived in Lagos all his life. So I'd quiz him. I'd be like, tell me what life in Lagos is like and all that stuff. So he really began to tell me about his life, and I found it very inspiring. He had gotten out of school when he was 17, and he began to work, earn some money. But here was the kicker. He told me that at the time, because he wanted many people to get because he also has his own story with his own, like a time in his life where he wasn't sure and all that stuff. And then he said it was the Bible and his relationship with God that centered him and gave him that discipline and that peace and all of that. And so he wanted to do that for other people. So when he gets his salary, he would half it and organize, like go into communities and give them materials and talk to them and come back and fellowship with them and help many people get their life on. So I was listening to all of these things, and I'll never forget this particular night. He was telling me all of these things, but what he didn't realize was that I was crying. I was crying because I was like that is it. Like that feeling of, I know I'm made for something more, but I don't know what it is.
You saw.
I saw it. I was like, that is it. I want to help people. I want to serve people. I want my life to count towards something. And it was that night I made up my mind. He didn't know what happened. It was later on that I would tell this story and he would know what actually transpired that night. And something happened. We finished the conversation and he left. He couldn't see that I was crying that night. But as he left, I just sat there and I just said what I would call a simple prayer. I said, God, if you're there and you can hear me, I need your help. I want to be more. I want to do more with my life. And for me, it wasn't just another prayer. It was really, when you talk about a turning point, that was a turning point for me, because that day I made up my mind that whatever I have to give up, I will give up. Whatever I have to do, I will do. It's like someone who's drowning. They would cling onto a straw. They would do anything, right, to live again. Because I was yearning. I was alive, but I wasn't living. Or I was leaving, but I wasn't alive. And for me, that was a turning point. That was really where I made up my mind that I really wanted to serve people. And a constant, and that anchor for me now became my spirituality. I now had to start learning all over again. All my life I'd gone to church, but I knew nothing. I really wanted to, if this was psychophancy, I wanted to know, because I now had this brutal honesty, or would I say frankness to life. It's weird to explain, but I was no longer willing to just accept something because the pastor said it, or because it was said in church, or because it was what I was supposed to do. I wanted to understand why, and I wanted to know this God for myself. If it is true that he exists, if it is true that he, and I've heard with my cousin, for example, and that he's changed his life, I want it to be true for me as well. That was my attitude. So I began to study the Bible for myself for the first time in my life. One time I spent the entire night just studying for myself, and I would begin to pour in hours studying, listening to teachings on particular Bible verses, trying to understand all of this stuff. So that was really the turning point in my life. But there are two critical things here. One was that epiphany that I want to serve people. Two was the values that grounded me in my newfound in this newfound alertness, I guess, to awakeness to spiritual realities at the time. So really, it was also deeper than me just wanting to have business, at the time when I was 15.
Yeah. And this is after you had that understanding?
Yes, this is after. This is before then. I had no, life was foggy. I couldn't see past. That was the scariest part as well, because as a kid, I read a lot. And if you know anything about people who read, they imagine a lot. So in that period, what was really scary for me was the fact that I could not see past the very next day. It was so dark, it was so foggy, I couldn't see past the very next day, so that was scary. So when I came out of that, it was like this new vistas that opened. I could see colors again. And there was this desperateness. Another way I can describe it is someone who has a near-death experience. When they come out of that, there's a new hunger to life. There's a new outlook on life. So
like a switch has flipped.
So for me, it was also one gratitude that, oops, I have a second chance to do this all over again. I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to go hard. And also, I should also add this because it's very important. In the social context of things, I was known as this kid who lied a lot, who stole a lot, who cursed a lot. I was the best example for the bad example for every parent.
And did you still have that reputation after you had switched?
So I still had that reputation. I mean, the switch was known only to me and what happened in there.
Yeah, I meant like when you had moved to a different house and like a different school.
No, I didn't. So all of this coincided. So this was when I began to have a new reputation. But
Oh.
all my old friends
Mm-hmm.
still knew me for those things,
Yeah.
right? And so for me, there was also this need where I didn't want to be known like that.
Yeah.
Even when I was in the middle of all of that, I didn't want to be known for that, because that's literally everybody.
Yeah.
You know, people don't mind lying,
Yeah.
but they mind being called a liar.
True.
People don't mind stealing, but nobody wants to be called a thief.
True.
So that was basically where I was at the moment. And I desperately wanted to change that. So I began to throw myself into these things. And really, my desire to impact other young people like me stemmed from one. I was like, you know, if this could happen to me, it can happen to anybody. And that's also one of the things my personal empathy is also rooted in. I don't care where someone has been. I don't care what someone has done. I don't care what their mistakes are. I know two things. One is that they deserve a second chance like everyone else. Two is that they can get a second chance. With the right support, with the right help, they can get a second chance. So those were the two things I knew, and no one could take away from me. I wasn't an expert with human development and all of that stuff, but I was an expert with my experience. I was an expert with these two things. So I majored on that.
And you'd gone through it firsthand.
Yes, so I majored on that. So fast forward now, fast forward now to when I met those kids. There was that connection, of course, now because of this background. And
these kids, sorry, which kids are you referring to now?
the kids on the streets, when I first
Oh, okay,
encountered
yeah,
them,
yeah.
right? So I just befriended them. It started with one. I just befriended them. And I couldn't turn away. I helped that one. And then he brought his friend. And then they became 5. And then they became 10. At some point, there was a time where I would be walking on the street to try to get to a place where we can get food or we can sit down and talk. And at some point, there were times where I would be working on the streets, on a major street with about 30 children.
Just following you?
Just following me. So it was really, those are very interesting times. But anyway, what I told myself at the time, because coming back to purpose now, my idea of my purpose was I'm going to serve people by being a businessman. That was my idea. Now, helping disenfranchised youth, teens, children did not look like it. So there was that dissonance.
And even when you first started it, you didn't think it was the end goal?
Even 2 years in, 3 years in, I didn't think that was it, right? I felt it was accidental. And you have people, you know, calling you, oh, you're a very good guy. Yo, this is that street kid guy. And I'm sitting here, like, I want to be known, like, that's not just me. Like, I'm more than that. Like, so so I fought that, right? And I would learn a valuable lesson later on. And that lesson is that with purpose, it's not what. It's who.
Oh,
It's who.
interesting. Why do you say that?
And basically what that means is purpose is not what you're here for, like many people would define it. Purpose is who you're here for.
I've never heard someone say that before.
Purpose is who you're here for. And those kids were my purpose. These people were my purpose. And I would come to see life through this vantage point. That it doesn't matter the route I get there. The who
Is the center.
is the center.
And what led you to that understanding? Was there a moment, or again, was it a gradual understanding?
So I feel like it was a combination of both. It was a combination of a gradual understanding and um, an epiphany,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I reflect a lot, and I used to reflect a lot at the time. And I can remember one time when I asked myself a question.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what if? What if maybe I'm not supposed to set up these businesses? What if I'm supposed to serve and help these people so they can set up their businesses?
Mm.
What if I'm supposed to help these people so they can be successful? So it for the longest time it was in form of a question. Then it came to the point where I now really accepted that actually that's really what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say who is you need to understand that whether it's your mom, whether it's your brother, whether it's your sister, whether it's your friend,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's someone across the world whose story you can't shake off your back, whether it is whether it's yourself,
Mm-hmm.
it's always about who.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about a large number of people,
Yeah.
right? In my case, in my work, for example, there are over 150 million children across the world. But until Joshua is standing in front of me, 150 million is a statistic.
Mm-hmm.
You
And
know,
then it's not a person.
It's not a
you
person.
See the face.
yeah. So as long as I was concerned, Joshua, who was in front of me, was who I was here for.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even have to think about it as your entire life. Like this is who your entire life is here for. In this moment,
Mm-hmm.
who are you here for?
Mm.
So that's basically that was basically that thing that kicked off that switch and literally freed me to be able to do everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So tying it now back to your first question,
Yeah.
I was now in school. I'd been in school for 3 years, but no sooner had I got into university than I had realized that school wasn't for me. And school wasn't for me just practically because, I mean, different people have different reasons, but for me, it was just very practical. What I was doing at the time,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't valuable to it.
It just didn't match up with. Like,
It didn't match up what I was trying to do, and what I was learning was completely different. I found it impractical. There are people
Mm-hmm.
who can tolerate that. There are people who can even live through that without even thinking, but I can't.
Yeah.
You know, I think about and I reflect a lot. So it felt like a waste of my time. It felt like a burden. It felt like a financial burden. It felt like an emotional burden. It felt like a
Interesting.
mental burden. It felt like a burden in every sense of the word.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even very social in school because once I go to school, once class is done, I'm out. I had my class had about 500 students.
Really.
I didn't know up to 5.
And this was your university class?
The University of Calabar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a very large university for context. There are about 60,000 people, and the whole university is probably the size of Boca.
Mm.
So it was a pretty massive university. But once I went for class, I'm out. You know,
Yeah.
today from that university, I only speak to 2 classmates I had.
Really?
Yeah, and that was just because I was so invested in my work. School felt like a distraction.
Mm.
So in my 3rd year, I heard about Watson Institute. At that point, I was already getting ready to give up on school. I wasn't ready to even go to another school. I wasn't even seeing myself in academics anymore. It was just like, I'm going to do what, and that's another thing about, purpose. Like, I think there's just this thing about purpose that changes your symbols of success change as well.
Mm.
And you see this in many, great people, right? You're willing to go under the fire because you feel more centered. Like your soul is yearning for something that all these arbitrary things that most of the world would live through.
Yeah.
It doesn't suffice for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And go to middle school, high school, university, get a job, get married, raise a family, and
In a house, the typical.
yeah, basically. But and I don't want to knock that, just in case someone is listening and that's all they want.
Yeah.
That's okay as well, right? I mean, different
Mm-hmm.
people want different things. But I guess when you're so centered, you're willing to go against the grain. So for me, it was like, whatever. But then I heard about Watson. I was like, major in your mission.
And was this Watson the bachelor program or Watson the incubator program?
So the bachelor's program was just launched. We are the pioneer class.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember even trying to want to, like test the waters by going to the incubator first.
Yeah.
Before
Committing to
the whole thing. So in my form, they gave the opportunity to say, "Are you interested in both?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said I was interested in both. And when I got on the interview and all of that, I can remember Megan, who interviewed me. She still works, I believe, at Watson at Boulder.
Mm-hmm.
Megan Christensen. She said to me that it doesn't make sense to do the semester incubator program and then later on do the degree track program.
Mm-hmm.
Because think about the incubator as one semester in your 3 years, so you might as well just go in. So I thought about it for a while, and I was like, okay, this is a huge leap, but it was scary, it was exciting as well, because the prospect of also doing something different than what I was really excited me as well. So that was how I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go all in. I was in the middle. I was back and forth for months. I was the last student who resumed.
Really?
Yeah, I was the last student who resumed classes. I can remember even I applied for my visa 2 weeks
before you had to come.
Before I had to come. I bought my flight ticket 48 hours before I flew to Miami.
Really?
I was on the flight from Calabar to Lagos.
Yeah.
To pick up my visa the next day and travel the very next morning.
Really?
When I bought the ticket to Miami.
And that was just because you weren't sure if that's the move you wanted to go?
I was so unsure. I was so unsure that I wanted to do this. It was also very scary. I had a lot of stuff going for me. And then here is an organization that was now 3 years old.
Mm-hmm. And the first class of that program.
Yes. I didn't even think about that part so much, to be honest. I mean, I thought about me adjusting to school as an institution and not knowing what that would be like. But I was just thinking about, like, is this really what I want to do? Like, here is a class that, what if I don't like it? What if it's not for me? What if it doesn't fit in? But greater than that, am I chasing the wind?
Mm-hmm.
Because here is something that I'm doing. Here's something that I love. Here's something that's working. Here's an organization that I've now built that's 3 years old, that's thriving. And without a shadow of doubt, I knew that was what I wanted to do. You know what actually was okay, this is it. I'm going all in.
Yeah.
For me, I was having this conversation. I was still very unsure. I was in Switzerland for about a week.
For the program we were talking about?
Before I came back to Nigeria for 3 days and flew to Miami. And I was talking to someone, and
In Switzerland.
in Switzerland, Shruti is her name. She's just amazing. And I was going through the motions with her, and she talked to me about the concept of making decisions out of love and fear. And I can remember at the time, the other thing was, if Watson works, if Watson is what they say it is, it's great for my work because I'm going to have a larger network. I'm going to have the right tools. And at the time, I was also, and I'm still obsessed about the problem of street children on a global scale.
Yeah.
But I was increasingly getting obsessed about this problem on a global scale. And I wanted to do something on a global scale as well. Because when you're working on the grassroots level, it's like, it's like fighting a hydra-headed monster.
Yeah.
You cut off one head, you help one child, two grows in its place.
Yeah, and I imagine it's hard to tell that you're actually doing something.
Right. It's also hard to, actually tell that you're making progress. So I was like, okay, maybe I need to look at this from a systems perspective. And at the time, I just thought from a global perspective. Yeah. So there was that was also burning in my heart, underneath all of this. And Shruti is having this conversation with me, and she said, if you don't go, would it be because of fear or love? I said, it will be because of fear. Fear of the unknown. I just don't know what's on the other side. Yeah. So I want to hold on to what I have right now. Then she said, if you go, would it be because of fear or love? I said, definitely not fear. Fear is not motivating me to go. It will be because of love for what I do, love for being better, and love for doing much more than what I'm currently doing, but generally love for what I do.
Yeah.
And then she said, I think you have your answer. What do you want to do? Act out of love or out of fear?
Interesting.
And that was it for me. I knew I was going, and I knew that no matter what it was, I was willing to jump out of a plane and build my parachute on the way down, regardless of what it was. And mind you, I was also committing to so much debt by getting on that plane because of the tuition here. Yeah. And I don't have any parents that's going to assist me with this tuition. I don't know nobody that's going to assist me with this tuition. Yeah. I can remember sending Andrew an email. I don't know if I should say that. I'll say it anyway. I remember sending Andrew an email. I said to him, I said, I was supposed to raise $10,000 before I resume.
And you didn't.
I didn't have that money. And I remember sending an email to Andrew, and telling him, hey, I don't have this money. Yeah. I wish there was another way to tell you, because I'd been spending months trying to fundraise, and I don't think I'd raised more than $500. Yeah. Coupled with the fact that I also have issues with asking people for money for myself. Asking people for money in general, it's a lot easier when I'm asking for a good cause, for work. Yeah. But so I can remember this. I said, I don't have this money, but I give you my word. If you let me come, I'll find a way to raise the money. And it was like, okay, you can come, and you can, So I was like, okay, this is really, really wild card. What if I can't raise this money? What if I can't raise $10,000? Yeah. At the time, that was just so I could come. And immediately I paid that, I had another $13,000 to pay. Yeah. So it was so ridiculous. So yeah. So I came, and the rest is history. I was able to pay off all that money by raising, money and all that stuff. But, basically that was how I arrived at Boca, and that's how Boca has become my home for the last 2 years.
I want to go back to something you said about the grassroots aspect and how you wanted to look at it from a wider perspective. Because I haven't worked with nonprofits before, or at least not on that direct of a scale. But I imagine that working on that grassroots scale at the beginning would be super valuable. So I guess just if you have a perspective on that and the value of that as opposed to just looking at it from a large systems view?
That's a very important question, because I feel like you can't solve a problem if you're far removed from it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the primary value of being at the grassroots level becomes crucial.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about, working with people as opposed to working for people. In fact, there's a quote that I love and it's by an indigenous Australian activist,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's work together.
Mm.
So I think it points to fundamentally this idea that you can just stay from somewhere and propose solutions.
Yeah.
And many times those cause more harm than good. And even this is even very valuable as business, with businesses as well. You know, if a business does not understand its entire chain and ecosystem and stakeholders, it will fail.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would assume what the stakeholders need. It would assume what, the customers need. And this is where, businesses do it right as opposed to non-profit organizations and many times social enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
Businesses are willing to get their hands dirty to find out what the customers want, to satisfy and meet the customers. They're driven by the customers' needs, right?
And I feel like a lot of times they're also a lot more critical of their own processes.
Right.
As opposed to nonprofits. Like, you're doing good, so it's hard to be like, oh, cancel this because there can be better. So it's hard to make that trade-off.
Right. And it's almost like, okay, just because you're doing good, it's enough.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do good well.
That's a good point.
So it's basically, I think they're not very different, businesses and nonprofits. In fact, and that's basically the fundamental philosophy of social entrepreneurship, where you're thinking about social problems like a business would think about its services and its, systems. So fundamentally, it's too important, and then you come to the conversation, especially in social impact and social entrepreneurship circles, is who is qualified to solve a problem. If you don't have a lived experience, are you qualified to solve a problem?
This is an interesting debate that we were having in class the other day, and I want to hear your perspective first.
Well, this is what I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think that two things are important when we talk about who is qualified. I think a lived experience is important, but it's by far should not be the only thing to measure what qualifies someone to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think going back to that quote by that Australian activist, it is about understanding the connection between you and the problem. And it doesn't have to be like that you were in that exact same situation, right? Two is an emotional commitment to the problem, not your solution. I think that is really what qualifies you to solve a problem, because it's not something that you earn. It's something that you keep earning, and there's a type of qualification that comes over a long period of time. It's not something that comes in the beginning. And I tell you this, I've spoken with, even in my space, people who've worked on that space for 30 years.
Yeah.
And they still feel like they're still being qualified, And so that's basically what it is. I mean, I think you also have to be willing to re-immerse yourself.
What do you mean by that?
For example, you can look at me and say, I'm qualified to work on the problem that I'm working on with that specific context of, my community and as a result of my own experiences. But am I qualified to work on it on a global scale?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So that is where, for me, for example, experiences like No Exist Day is also a part of my process to re-immerse myself and constantly qualify myself to work on the problem.
And gain a deeper understanding.
A deeper understanding, because the moment you think that you got it, then you don't.
So when we were having that debate in class,
Mm-hmm.
I think I had a similar position where I thought there was two aspects. One, just that you care enough to solve
Mm-hmm.
the issue. I didn't think about it in perspective of being passionate about a solution versus a problem, but I think
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely a good clarification. So one, that you're willing to do it and want to see it through. And I guess the second thing is just having an understanding of your effect and a deep enough understanding to know that what you're doing is not going to make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like other than that, like that's pretty much it. And then you can figure out things as you go. But as long as you aren't making things worse, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I think I drew the line, where you're qualified to solve this problem or to tackle this issue.
Right. And sometimes it's difficult to tell whether you're making it worse or not, especially when you're in the middle of it.
True.
And this is where, an emotional commitment to the problem becomes very key.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that you're willing to work on this over a long period of time. Because if it's a I call it hit and run project. If it's a hit and run project, if you make a mistake, then you're not there to fix it.
Yeah.
If you're
Oh,
there,
yeah.
if no,
No, go ahead.
if you make a wrong, and we make mistakes all the time. Think about it like your normal average life.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get a break off your life.
Mm-hmm.
If you make a mistake in your life, it's right there. You will have to confront it at some point or another.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are solving a problem that's not directly affecting you, and you make a mistake and other people are going to bear the brunt, this is where when you talk about knowing that you're not hurting and drawing the line at that, that's where drawing the line becomes crucial. Because if you make a mistake, then you're not there to fix it. And going back to the first philosophy, I said where everybody deserves, a second chance. I don't think, mistakes are irreversible and people should be even afraid of making mistakes. I think people should throw themselves out there and make mistakes. But then again, even coming back to the fundamental principle in terms of, qualification for solving a problem, going back to lived experience, working on the problem over a long period of time is a lived experience. It's a lived experience in itself. So that's where, for me, it's those variables. There's the lived experience part, there's emotional commitment to the problem, and all of these things come together to offer qualification. And talking about having to re-immerse yourself over and over again, these are some of the things that are just too crucial, and you can't yeah. And when you talk about and just going back to purpose again, I understand that I might not be working directly on this problem for the rest of my life. That's pretty clear to me. And for example, with what I did with Erupt this past summer, as time goes on, I will be more invested in Erupt than I am even with my organization, just in general. But you also need to be able to find two things in any problem that you're passionate about. One is a philosophy. Two is a way of life. You need to find those two things in whatever problem you're trying to solve.
So what do you mean by philosophy?
And the way of life. Okay. First of all, give me an idea of a problem, a random problem.
The environmental impact of the fashion industry.
The environmental impact of the fashion industry. That problem would not exist if we all had the philosophy to wear fashion conscientiously, wear and make fashion conscientiously.
Yeah.
And rather the philosophy of taking the environment into account, first of all, while we make and wear fashion,
Yeah.
and then the lifestyle of wearing fashion that doesn't harm the environment in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not you're actively trying to lobby for this problem or create solutions for this problem,
Mm-hmm.
all of that is as important as you imbibing that philosophy personally,
Yeah.
bringing it into your way of life in terms of what you wear
Yeah, for sure.
and what you like and how you relate with people on a daily basis. I think the same is true of every problem on earth.
Yeah, especially with the way of life, because it's really easy to say like you have to do this, and then you look at yourself and like, okay, am I actually doing that?
Right.
Am I actually living that
Right.
way?
And that's where, to be honest, that's at the center of every problem. Because what do you really want? You want a change of behavior by everyone on earth. That's really what you want. So so coming back to understanding this fundamentally about problems you're trying to solve, this would really help with framing your life beyond what you're actively doing. And it's weird to say actively doing, because if it's a philosophy that you truly embrace, believe, and that you live out through your lifestyle, then you're actively doing something.
Yeah.
So for example, even though I don't work actively with children on the streets, coming back, I can't be a dad who is like terrible to my kids.
Yeah.
That defeats the whole purpose of the work
Exactly.
that I've been doing.
Yeah.
So this is where that philosophy has to translate into my own personal life. This is where it now has to translate into my lifestyle as to how I move through the world. How am I working to make sure that children around me are protected? And I'm not just talking about, it's easy to get on a project to help a kid in India.
Yeah.
What about my niece?
For sure. And I think that definitely, I don't know if it's easier now, because I feel like that's always the case. But with social media, I think it's very easy to go against that. And even, not even just with social issues, just with anything. This is something Pablo and I were talking about in our episode, but just like these business gurus that are like, do this to start a business. These are the 10 things you have to do, and they've never done it themselves. Like their business is telling you that you have to do that, and that's all. Yeah.
I just to say something to that real quick. Someone said something that I thought was very interesting. He said, no one ever tells you that, no one ever finds gold and makes it a business
to tell you where to find
tell everyone where to find gold.
It's true.
No one ever does that. Never in the history of mankind has that ever been done.
Yeah.
If people find a way to make money, they'll be busy making money.
Yeah.
If you find someone who is busy trying to tell you how to make money, you are their way of making money.
It's true. And also, with social media, where you present this image of yourself, I mean, it happened over the summer. I think that this was a good example with George Floyd. Everybody reposting black squares, and then that was it. They were done. It's like, are you?
And everybody moves on.
Exactly. It's like, okay, are you? The video stopped again. But are you living that way of life, or are you just presenting that?
Because that's the easy part. So I think that's another example, speaking about the philosophy and the way of life. Ultimately, is it black squares that would defeat racism? Ultimately, even the donations it's not going to help. Ultimately, it's going to be about what individuals think about themselves and think about other people.
True.
And how they adjust their lifestyle to change this. And I won't even lie to you. During the summer, when all of that was going on, and I saw, celebrities posting, these things, I'm not one to really criticize people or tell people what to do with their resources. I don't think that's my business.
Yeah.
But I couldn't help but think, are these people actively putting in their time and their resources to, first of all, primarily make life better for the people around them that are affected by this problem? I'm talking about the people that work for them. I'm talking about the people, some of them colleagues, that they are in very, very toxic and very harsh competition with, that they would do anything to get them. And then in general, why do we have to care so much for a dead George Floyd than we did a living George Floyd? No, think about it. Like, why do we have to care so much? If we cared so intensely for George Floyd when he was alive, what would have life felt like? What would his life been like? Just think about that for a second. What would George Floyd's life been like if he received this kind of love and support when he was alive?
It's true. I think it was something that I was struggling with this summer as well, asking myself those questions. And it's very easy, like the shock value of it, I think definitely elicits an emotional response that wouldn't have otherwise been felt. But I think it was another thing building off of that. Like even afterwards, if you are going to care about afterwards, how do you sustain that in the long term? And it's something I'm still struggling with, I guess. But how do you make it last so that it's not just like a week later and you forget about it, and how do you prevent the next one, I guess?
Yeah, so two things I'll say to that is, one, George Floyd is still alive. In fact, there are millions of George Floyds that were waiting for the next shocking viral video to care about.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be the case. Then secondly, I think it goes back to a fundamental human value and virtue. That is not mutually exclusive from purpose. And it's answering that question. Today, who am I here for? Today, this very day, who am I here for? Who can I go out of my way to serve, to help, to be kind to, and to speak to, you know? And so I think that's really what it is about. So that way you're not actively trying to do something or remember something or not forget something. It's just a lifestyle. It's just something you're trying to live.
I think, building off of that question, something that I have realized that I do, and I still do, and I try to be better at it, but like last year, for example, when I was building up quality, trying to push sustainable fashion, I guess, and create impact in that way. And so like everything I was doing was trying to focus on that and create impact in that way. But then I had to think to myself, and like by doing that, I would like lock myself away, work all the time, which I don't think is inherently bad. But then in day-to-day interactions with like friends and people around me, I wouldn't be like the nicest individual all the time, or like there's just like stuff that I would do that's like, I don't know, I guess not going against the same values of trying to create impact. So I think it's, in a way, it's easy to chase that big vision of impact, and then while you're doing that, it's easy to get lost in the people that you actually interact with on a day-to-day basis around you.
Right, and I completely agree with you. And for me, this is where the way I started out is really one of the things that I guess really helps me. So I don't even have to remember it. It's second nature because of how I didn't start out like writing letters, and with my organization, for example, I didn't start out writing a vision
Mm-hmm.
for the organization.
Yeah.
I started out with one human interaction. So everything that the organization does from a more bureaucratic point of view is informed by those human interactions.
Mm-hmm.
It now seeps deep within me where any other thing, and this is where sometimes for me it can be a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't see how something is going to practically help people, it's hard for me to be motivated to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I can barely find motivation to do it, right?
Yeah.
And also, it also has affected, I can imagine that if a brain scan was done on me before I got into all of this, and a brain scan was, done after, I can imagine that my brain has altered a great deal because it affects the way I see life. If I see something,
Yeah.
my mind already starts thinking about how this is great for people.
Yeah.
How this would, for example, I looked at the shoe designs that you made on your Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't just seeing what you were doing, and it wasn't something that I was trying to do. I was seeing those shoes on the feet of people.
Yeah. Interesting.
I couldn't help it. That was how I was seeing it, and that's how I see life. Even right now, while we're speaking, I can't help but think about the fact that someone is listening to this right now. Even though someone isn't listening to this right now. Do you understand? And that's why you remember when we were talking earlier and I turned and I was like, and if you're
watching this, I don't. Yeah.
So it's literally how my brain has literally been, my mind has literally been adapted to actually always think about people. So I think, it's pointless trying to, change it from outside in.
Mm-hmm.
It's pointless trying to make a checklist of actions to do. That's why I think it starts with the philosophy and then it translates into the lifestyle. So, and the beautiful thing about that, this is the great news now, is that anything you want to become, you can become primarily by first thinking it.
Mm. So do you believe in like manifestations and things like that?
I think I think manifestations are more abstract.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more science. Garbage in, garbage out.
Andrew.
I think that's what it is. It's science. The information we receive comes into us and forms us. Information informs us, comes into us and forms us. So if I want to become a certain way, all I need to do is to look out for a certain type of information and sit on it for a while. And before you know it, I will begin to think that way. And as a man thinks, so is he.
It's true.
You're what you think.
And I think building off of that, have you heard of like the idea that you're an average of your an average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with?
Yeah.
Which I think is a similar aspect. And with that, I've been trying as well with like Instagram. I unfollowed all like the meme accounts that I followed, which is like it's something small, but still I feel
it's
like
significant because every time you turn on, you choose who you follow, but who you follow now creates you because that's what you're looking at.
It's true, exactly. And I've been trying to think of it more as content, like your diet, like trying to.
It is your diet. That's exactly what it is.
Exactly.
And it's everything. It's the thing. It's the things you don't think about. It's the music you listen to. It's the movies you watch. That's why if I watch personally, if I watch movies that are, when I watch movies, one of two things happen.
Yeah.
My mind either takes that information and automatically processes it in the way my mind is already set up to work.
Yeah.
Or my mind fights it.
And tries to reject it?
Reject whatever it is that, is, for example, if I'm watching or listening to something that's very anti-human, anti-people, my mind would automatically fight it. It's going to be, sometimes I even discover in retrospect, that's why I couldn't finish that series. That's why I couldn't finish that movie. Because it's very anti-people. you know. And for me, that's, for example, one of the most fundamental like things, right? And or my mind interprets it differently automatically. It just interprets it in a different
like tries
light.
to mold it into the way that you want to see it.
So it's in little things, the things you see on your feed, the people you follow. There's the saying that you are the same person. You're going to be the same person in 5 years, except for the books you read and the people that you meet. So it's literally exactly what you said about you're an average of the 5 people that you. It's the principle of it.
Yeah.
It's the principle of it, because all of this it's information you're collecting. So that's why for me, it's more or less, it's more science than it is abstract or art.
Yeah.
It is exactly what you will get out of it. Like, it's like a sponge. You're not going to soak a sponge in vodka and squeeze it and then orange juice comes out.
Yeah, interesting. It's more like a math equation, I guess. Like,
yeah, basically.
one side that has to balance out eventually.
Yeah. So I think fundamentally, if people want to, that's why for change makers, I think this is also the principle of lived experience. It's not just because, you need to check off a social, I guess, checklist for qualification to work on the social issues. To work on social issues. I think it is the principle that if you've lived through something, it's going to inform your values and your way of life.
That's been something I've been trying to think about more. And like you mentioned reflection. And I think that it's funny because in high school, my school did a ton of reflections. Like after every activity, everything, you would have to write a reflection, and I would hate it. I hated reflections. I would never want to do it. I would always like try to BS it as much as possible. But now I'm realizing that that's, like, in a way, that's, I don't know, this sounds corny, but like a superpower to...
It is a superpower. What's the difference between human beings, and a buffalo?
In a what?
A buffalo. Or it's an animal. It's a...
a buffalo.
A buffalo.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between a man and a buffalo, a lion or a tiger or a dog? What's the difference?
The ability to
reflect.
Think and reflect on
Yeah,
on your own.
because animals can think, and they can think critically too.
True. But I guess the self-awareness. I think that's
that's basically what it is. But guess what? Many people, this superpower, many people don't use.
It's true. It's easy, and even sometimes I don't. It's easy to just go through things and
not think about them.
Because also part of it is you have to challenge yourself, and a
think
lot of times the reflection is you ended up doing something wrong. You have to like tell yourself, hold up, your life isn't perfect. You're not perfect.
Right.
You messed up.
And
there's
that's
ways
hard
to improve. It is hard.
Yeah, that's hard.
All right, that's been almost an hour and a half.
Wow.
That went by fast.
Yeah.
I don't want to take this on too long, but thank you again for all of your time.
No, thank you.
Is there anything, I guess, you want to plug, or?
Well, first of all, thank you. And as someone personally who likes to like listen to stuff like this and go through the motions like this, I think for people who are listening to this, I think it's just beyond them listening to something. It's a challenge for them to have like this kind of conversations with themselves, with other people. And I'm going to also make a recommendation. If you have friends we can talk about stuff with, you need new friends. It's true. Many people don't have friends that can talk through, stuff and just, stuff like that. And it's always, let's go party, let's go do this, let's go do that, let's go do that. But I think that's that. But thank you for doing this. And I mean, personally, I didn't come here as anything but someone who just wanted to have a great conversation. And there are many things from this conversation that that I've learned from, that has made me think about stuff. And when you're trying to figure stuff out, don't just think about it as a destination. It will frustrate you. Well, because it isn't the destination.
And if you're always chasing a destination, there's always another one.
Yes. And so that's the recipe for living an unfulfilled life. You have to be willing to, you have to just understand that it's a constant process. It's a constant process. You are going to constantly, have to keep figuring, stuff out. Life is literally like a river. There's an African proverb, and I think it's also a physics law as well, that you can't step into the same river twice.
What do you mean by that?
Because if you step into a river and you take out your foot, it's a different river. The moment it's already gone. When you put your leg, it's a different river now. So that's exactly how life is, and that's why you have to constantly
refocus.
Yeah, refocus. Basically, you have to constantly refocus. Imagine if you had a camera that just has one setting, so forth. You take the most, ridiculous pictures. But that's all I have to say. I'm looking forward to even listening to this again. So thank you so much, Jordan.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So that's it. I hope you enjoyed. If you watched up until this point or listened up until this point, I appreciate you. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment with something that resonated. Or if you're listening to this audio only, send me a DM of something that resonated. I'd love to hear back from you if anybody listens this far. But yeah, peace.